We don't wake up ill. There's something triggering it.
Nearly 50 million Americans live with chronic conditions, hidden toxins or hidden infections that are contributing to the rise in these symptoms. Women statistically are often diagnosed or even misdiagnosed with autoimmune conditions, thyroid conditions, viral conditions, chronic fatigue or migraines or mood swings that doctors can't explain.
They're told they're crazy or nothing's wrong with them because they may look perfect. They're told that the labs are normal, and so they give up. And I always tell patients who look, when it comes to neuroinflammation, it's reversible. Your brain can heal. Once your brain is damaged, we can help to heal it.
If you could teach the world one brain health skill, what would it be?
You can do all the supplements and cold plunges and all the things and the biohacking you want, but if you're not focusing on, then it's not going to connect.
All right, Dr. Eboni Cornish, welcome to Rooted in Wellness.
Thank you for having me.
I am so thrilled to have found you. My gosh, you are a mom of triplets. I'm smiling ear to ear. And I shared with you just finding a woman who's operating at your caliber, who's a woman in this space, who's also a woman of color. I feel overjoyed to have found you. And thank you for the feedback of recognizing that it's a missing piece in our world. So I'm grateful for you to be here today.
Yeah, and it is a missing piece because a couple weeks ago, I got elected as the first African American of president-elect of ILADS, which is our International Lyme and Associated Diseases Society. So I know this space is changing, and we're looking for more diversity and just women, men of all types of backgrounds, just to learn what it is we do in this field.
Absolutely. And congratulations. That's huge. And you have triplets who are 9.
Crazy. That's what it's called. Crazy girl.
Well, you figured out something that works. So we'll dive into that today. So today's theme will be about the things that you're such an expert at speaking to: the biological brain, healing inflammation, infection, also understanding that inner intelligence that I love that you speak to. But before we dive in, to give you a sense of what this podcast is all about, it's all about ancient wisdom in our modern day world and how we can merge the two together and become more rooted. This is rooted in our health, in our happiness, and in that inner knowing that we have to heal ourselves. So I would love to ask you, gosh, even with this week's announcement, do you notice when you get uprooted in your life and what causes you to feel uprooted?
Yes, I think there are a lot of things. I'm a very, very spiritual person. With all my patients, I tell them, I'm praying for you. I say, God bless you, and that keeps me grounded. Those are things, my faith in medicine and trying to be a healer, especially because I see people who are struggling. And when they come to my office, they're scared, I'm like that last resort. And they've seen so many people dismiss them or misdiagnose them. And so it's just a blessing to be able to help those people because they're there for a reason. So that's kind of what keeps me going. But then you have the stress part. And so you always have to find that balanced approach in life to do like your mission, your driven mission, and also to take care of yourself. So, that's kind of like the way I look at how I work and how I live.
You are such a testament to who you are. I love how when I asked you about feeling uprooted, you turned that into your purpose of healing. And that says a lot. That knows that I'm speaking to somebody who's in alignment. And as you said, as a healer who can go out into that world, recognizing that that's like an anchoring truth for you. Do you have a daily practice? You mentioned that faith and spirit are really important to you, but do you have rituals every day that help you feel rooted in who you are?
Yeah, so the first thing I like to do every morning is just sit out in the sun and just become grateful for this day. I know and it's always when the kids are sleeping, right? Because I wake up first. I'm an early riser intentionally, but it's that sense of being quiet and just, having those deep breaths and reminding myself that today is a new day. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced before. and I will never repeat tomorrow. So I'll forgive myself for what happened before this
Mm,
day and live it to the fullest, no matter what comes my way. And so that's kind of my mantra every morning is with gratitude and just being like I'm living in my purpose, but then also forgiving myself of any mistakes I may have made, whatever
mm.
they are, because that's old news. You have to move forward and enjoy that moment. So that just really gets me going. And I think people don't do that enough. Just talk about what they're grateful for, and even waking up. That's kind of how I start.
You got it. The reason why I asked that question to start with is we've overcomplicated wellness and what it truly means to be well. And every expert that sits in that seat will list these things that are all free. These are modalities that are free for us to anchor in our truth, our health, and our happiness every single day. And you brought up something that's very unique, which is forgiveness. Forgiveness as part of our healing. It's almost like, in the way that I speak about it, it's alleviating darkness within and creating liberation for light to come in. And when there's more light, I think there's more flow and more healing to happen. So thank you for that reflection. I think that in our morning gratitude practice, we don't often think about what we need to forgive, who we need to forgive, or what we need to forgive as part of our healing.
Yeah, that's absolutely right because we get so overwhelmed by what we did wrong, right?
Got it. Yeah.
And what may have been disappointing. And I even tell my patients that, when I'm trying to make recommendations, an easy one is lifestyle and diet, right? Every
Hmm.
patient with any type of chronic condition, we always focus on healing the basics and also starting with, the gut and the diet. And I tell them, try one step at a time. None of us are perfect. You
Yeah.
forgive yourself
Yeah.
even if you fail at trying, because we have fails at our try, when we're trying to do things. So it's okay. And it's okay to accept that because that's the only way you'll grow is if you come to the point where you're giving your all.
Hmm.
Maybe the outcomes weren't what you thought. Maybe you couldn't make those overnight changes with your lifestyle, but at least you tried and you'll
Yeah.
try
Yeah.
again.
You're human. What a beautiful reflection. Um, let's shift to a quick round of rapid fire questions. All right.
I'm
What's
ready.
real? What's myth? What's really changed for you as a physician? You are the front lines of modern illness. So here's the first one. What's one body signal that you never ignore anymore?
I never ignore kind of my worry
Mm.
because it's something that naturally happens. We get this sense of angst. Am I making the best decision for my patients, for my family? And so when that thought comes, I try to find ways to just let it flow, but I don't ignore it. I have to acknowledge what it is that stimulates me so that I know how to handle it. But I think some people just say, oh, like ignore. A lot of times I'll write it down and I'll come back to it later.
I love it. Again, you didn't list a physical symptom, but the cause of what could cause the physical symptom. Next one. What's one thing that most people misunderstand about chronic illness or neuroinflammation?
So the one thing that they misunderstand all the time is that you can get better.
Mhm.
There is
Mhm.
an end to this, and there are people who will help you. And the reason I say that, Mona, is because so many people who are dealing with those things, neuroinflammation, chronic complex illnesses, it's a spiritual and emotional journey. They lose hope. They lose faith because, they're told they're crazy or nothing's wrong with them because they may look perfect. They're told that the labs are normal. And so they give up. And I always tell patients, look, there is always someone who can help you out there. You just got to keep finding that right provider. And when it comes to neuroinflammation, it's reversible. So when
Mm.
people hear that, they're like, oh my God, I'm dementia. No, your brain can heal.
Mm.
Once your brain is damaged, we can help to heal it. And people don't think of that. They think, oh, my memory's gone, it's gone forever, or I'm gonna be anxious for the rest of my life. That is one misconception about neuroinflammation, and that there's usually something contributing to it, like a root cause.
Oh, we're going to dive into that. All right. If you could teach the world one brain health skill, what would it be?
I would put everyone on a sleep regimen.
Hmm.
Sleeping is healing your brain. And so many times we are in a society where it's so addictive, like our front of our brain, we stimulate all this dopamine. So all we want to do is scroll and read and do, then stay awake. And we don't realize if we're not getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep, if we're not getting into a regular routine, then our brain won't heal. So whatever I do with patients, the first thing I do is let's set up a sleep pattern for you because that rest, that relaxation
Hmm.
will allow for your brain to detox and will allow for your hormone, that stress hormone, to reset. So
Hmm.
that's one thing I focus on quite a bit. And it's so simple. Those are easy
So
things.
simple. The foundation, right?
You have to open the foundation.
What's a popular healing trend that actually keeps people stuck?
That's a great question. I think juice fasting these
Mm,
people stuff because a lot of times people do it without guidance, right? They just say, oh, I'm going to juice. And then sometimes they'll juice with things that are rich in sugar. And then they don't have the right support they might need. May that be for liver detox or for antioxidants. And they don't have the right vitamin and nutrient balance. And they're not doing it where it's guided by a health professional. I
mm.
think that is dangerous in some cases, but you hear a lot about it. Buy these bulk juices. You
Yeah,
can do
yeah.
it. You'll lose 10 pounds, but they can be very harmful if you're not using the guidance of a provider and making sure you're providing restoration with those nutrients that you truly need and that your sugar is balanced because that's going to help with your brain being balanced.
Cleansing without restoration. You nailed it. All right, last rapid fire. What emotion do you see most often driving the physical symptoms?
Fear.
Mm,
I
a lot of
see
that
that
today.
fear. We are always worried about something. You're scared of anything. And especially when it comes to chronic illnesses, the word alone, if you're thinking about someone understanding your brain and your brain not being perfect or your
Mm,
health not being perfect, it's scary, right?
absolutely.
So I think that drives a lot of people. That fear factor alone is a feeling that a lot of my patients, and I would tie that with worry. Those are the two.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're so prevalent today.
Yes.
All right, let's dive into the source of it all. When we look at recent data, it's overwhelming. Nearly 50 million Americans live with chronic conditions with autoimmune disease. 1 in 3 adults experience chronic fatigue or brain fog symptoms that can't be explained by standard labs. You have worked at the intersection of these silent epidemics. And people today, to your point, they say that they feel foggy. They say that they feel stuck. I think a lot of what we're doing is blaming our hormones also. But, still, even with some therapy, they can't explain the why. So I'm curious from your perspective, what's actually happening in the body and the brain when we live with chronic stress or inflammation?
So the gut and the brain are key because they're connected by the longest nerve in the body. And that's the nerve, it's called, that keeps you either relaxed or keeps you in fight or flight. And it's
Mm,
very simple. Medicine is very simple because when you think about stress, right, that makes your cortisol go up. It's like your body feels like it's being chased by a bear. Well, if you're in that state, how are you going to heal? I always tell patients, I have to make sure that your brain feels safe to heal. Because if I don't, I'm going to be throwing all the things at you that might work. But if your brain is stuck in that fight or flight, and I haven't given it tools, like people hear about things like, limbic retraining or meditation or, other psychiatric and supplements, but you got to calm that part of the brain that keeps you going too fast in order to be able to receive therapy. Because if not, I see it every day. It doesn't work.
And it's becoming so chronic to the point where I think we've really normalized, right?
Yeah.
Normalized living with this level of stress, worry, anxiety. We talk to our friends and coworkers, and everyone else feels it as well. It's just the state of life today. And I think that that's what's driving these numbers, right? And driving the feeling of not waking up feeling our best and this complication of wellness. We don't attribute it to those things. And I'm sure you work with a lot of patients who may wear their stress as a badge of honor, right? And we're recognizing that this is really the demise of our health. And, you know, I'm grateful for the fact that nervous system regulation is now coming online. I'm grateful for the fact that, you know, the World Health Organization, they're classifying burnout now as a medical diagnosis, and that chronic stress really has some like physiological impact on the brain. And you talk about the brain as the foundation of true healing. I'm curious, what does it mean to view mental health as biological and measurable rather than purely psychological? Because that's what it used to be. When I went to nutrition school, also, it took Eastern medicine coming in to change our lens.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the way I look at it is this: mental health is brain health. You have to use it together because whenever there is a fundamental imbalance, especially let's just say, let's start with just mood, right? Those are chemical imbalances that take place. However, no one wakes up and says, I want to be sad today. This feels awesome. I want to feel anxious. I love it. I want to feel tired. So you have to look at the root cause because there's so many things in our society, may it be infections or toxins or just overall like lack of sleep and the foods we eat that can cause inflammation throughout the body that
Mm-hmm.
will then cause your brain to be inflamed. And when I look at what we specialize in at Amen Clinic is brain imaging, which I'm in love with SPECT scan brain imaging. And when I look at a person's brain, I can already tell if there is inflammation happening. I have a
Mm.
pattern that Dr. Amos created that shows brain inflammation. And so that can be, then you go down and start asking questions. And it can be very simple as something biologic. And then boom, you find that problem, you treat the real problem, and that person's mood gets better. And they
Mm.
start being able to titrate off all those other drugs that they thought were helping, but was just masking symptoms. So that's what I love about what I do is that I know that there's something underlying because we don't wake up ill. There's something triggering it.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And, blaming it on aging, right, is something that has also become so common. And I want to know more about this because it still blows my mind that in today's world, it's not easy for us to go and, you know, get a SPECT imaging scan or even a scan of our heart or gut microbiome. Like it's not as simple as we think. And you are in a very specialized aspect of understanding this, revealing patterns of toxicity and trauma and inflammation long before labs do. That's really unique to the Amen clinics. So, can you maybe help listeners understand what it is that you're looking for? What's specific about the Amen clinics and the types of imaging that you do?
So, what we do, which is pretty awesome because I believe so much in our mission, it's a 3D image of your brain. So, it's functional neurology. And what I mean by that, it's not like an MRI or a CT scan. We're going to be able to determine what areas of your brain are working too hard, where your areas of the brain are not working hard enough, where you're not getting the blood flow you need, and what it is we need to do to help stabilize the brain. So we can look at these patterns and it tells us the questions to ask. Is it a
Hmm.
traumatic brain injury? Does someone have PTSD? Is it ADHD? You go down the list, but then you take a step even further and you say, all right, if it's inflammation, now I'm going to do the testing. So it's a functional way of assessing the brain, and it's so rewarding to patients and families when you're able to show them, look, it's not all in your head. You have a pattern that's consistent with a certain diagnoses, of which if we can get your brain back to where it should be, you can heal. It's not just a mood. It's not just your age. It's not just an accident or stress. There's something we can prove to you that is in balance, but more importantly, give you an algorithm and a program to help heal it. And that's what
Mm,
you want to do, because so many times, like you said earlier, we think of, oh, inflammation. I'm forgetful. I'm tired. Well, why? And that's what
yeah.
I love about SPECT skin imaging, because it answers that. It gives me that why.
And this is part of why I wanted this podcast to really merge those worlds together. It is so cool what modern medicine can bring us. And I want to think, just hover on the fact that for our listeners, when they think about brain imaging, they're automatically thinking about brain injury or acute trauma. But you mentioned mood disorders, you mentioned root causes that may come from fatigue or maybe cognitive decline, and then knowing from there when in this world of functional medicine, I would say like what's trending is blood lab biomarkers or maybe stool testing. But still, many physicians aren't trained in uncovering the root cause or the interconnectedness to it. And how on earth can we forget about our brain, which
Exactly.
we rely on, right?
Every
So
day.
when I was studying your work, I was really dialing in on this word neuroinflammation, which is also trending, right? And I was thinking about this in the lens of today's modern world with the stress that we were talking about. But with my clients, I can really see that the rates of anxiety related disorders are going up, rates of depression also that are being mimicked, kind of throughout the US by 50%, actually. And even low grade inflammation can also cause imbalances within the brain. So we think about this through a sense of our gut. Maybe we have like some gut symptoms or digestive issues or something like that. But when we think about inflammation, that neural inflammation of the brain, that could actually be the root cause of our mental health systems. And can you maybe share a little bit about that and how you associate that? We can move into the gut and that interconnectedness through the vagus nerve also.
Yeah, so the reason I merged my functional practice, because I specialize in tick-borne diseases, pandas, gut health, you name it. That's what functional medicine is, was because one of my first patients, and this was 15 years ago, who had severe depression, anxiety, and actually bipolar. They
Mm,
had a brain scan, and the scan showed this inflammatory pattern. And she was on so many meds, Mona, and like a lot of listeners you have that just try meds after med and they fail. And once we did some testing and some biomarkers, we found that she actually had Lyme disease. And we
wow.
were able to treat her infection, and guess what? Her mood got better. So I look at it as neuropsychiatric manifestations of chronic illnesses. And people don't talk a lot about that, right? We don't think about the infectious markers, the viruses, the autoimmunity that can occur, because guess what? Our brain has its own immune system. Our gut
Hmm.
has most of its immune cells, and we don't put that together. So I always tell patients, look, I'm going to try my best. Don't give up. We're going to hold hands and we're going to do some detective work, because that's what I'm always called, the detective.
Yeah.
I don't stop. And when I
Yeah.
figure out what that missing link might be, especially because we don't talk a lot about this underlying infectious burden, even in our society, because so many of these illnesses are invisible. Oh, you don't look
Yeah.
sick. You're not having a fever. You're not. And then you're coming to the office, and once you're treated for what is found, the brain clears.
Hmm. It's fascinating. And, even if we pull back from acute symptoms, I wonder how many of our listeners can identify with just feeling a little bit less focus, a drop in their energy, a drop in their mood. And when, neuroinflammation doesn't even come to mind, right? So when you think about that, and I'm curious for a lot of the patients that you've worked with in the lens of sadness and depression, and now everything that we're uncovering about serotonin and the gut microbiome. The gut brain connection is a really big theme in your work. Can you
Yes.
explain how gut infections, how leaky gut, dysbiosis can create symptoms like anxiety, brain fog, and that hormonal chaos that can come afterwards?
We would talk for 4 hours about that.
We
But let
should.
me
I know
break
this
it
should be like
down.
a whole day
Let me break
event.
it down very simply. As we said earlier, there is a two-way communication between the gut and the brain. So whenever we say love your gut, you're loving your brain because it's like I told my teen patient today, I said, hey, it's a telephone tree. Your brain has a direct line to what's going on in your gut. So if you're feeding your gut poor choices, your brain is going to feel that and be inflamed as a
Mhm.
result. And then you're going to get that fog or that mood change. And guess what? 90%, as you were talking about earlier, of those neurotransmitters that we need to make our mood optimized found in the gut. And
Mhm.
so we're in this body where there are over 300 trillion good and bad bacteria, right? And all diseases are stemming from your gut. The bad bacteria, make it simple. They send bad signals. So if you're feeding them, you're going to have negative impact on your brain, whereas the good bacteria are going to send the good signals. But I'm sure, like most people listening, we have more bad bacteria than good. And so when you mention that term leaky gut, which comes from the foods we eat, the environment
Mhm.
we're in, but people don't mention the stress factor and how stress in and of itself can cause a leaky gut lining, right? I say it's also leading to a leaky brain because
Mhm.
those bad toxins, those organisms, those byproducts are filtering out the gut to places they don't belong, like the brain. And so, with all of my patients, we start with that balance. How can I optimize your gut? But one thing that I used to make, and I kick myself for it, is that I would recommend everyone in my office dairy free, gluten free, sugar free, blah, blah, blah. But I
Yeah.
did take into account cultural diets,
Mhm.
difficulty with, ability to afford food, how to make those selections that can keep you healthy, because everyone always thinks eating healthy is so expensive. So now I find myself giving patients ideas of what to eat, how to
Mm.
eat on a budget, how to make those baby steps so that we're not giving you a diet, but we're giving you a lifestyle and make it individually tailored because it's never a one stop fits all. I mean, of course, we don't want to be abusing with sugar. You don't want to go and,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's, but if it's too hard, you once again forgive yourself if you fail. But if you know what you can eat and it's culturally sensitive, then you're on the
Yeah.
right. This can change your entire life because that mother of five who's on one income can't afford Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, and getting all the gluten-free products, right? But they might be able to afford the frozen vegetables, which is better than anything, or the Asian markets or the farmers markets where things might be discounted. So you just have to make those slow changes, but you will start feeling that impact as it relates to brain function.
I love that you gave that reflection. It's one that doesn't often come from medical doctors, but one that's needed. How can we advise to cut out whole food groups to people who are simply wanting to feel better and when it's not achievable or doable or affordable? And I know for me, for the South Asian community too, going gluten free can come up with a lot of challenges, especially when you're feeding whole families as well, right? So it's that personalization that I think is so important. And we have to remember the simplicity of food and how easy it is to really eat healthy, and the strategy that can go behind that as well. And I want to go back to something that you said around so the serotonin in your gut, and then you mentioned environmental toxins that can be fueling inflammations not only inflammation, not only in the gut, but also in the brain. I was speaking to a client of mine who was in the sauna, and I've experienced this as well, but through detoxification or detox practices, they also experienced an emotional release. So, crying or the feeling of wanting to scream or something that was like feeling that stress leave their body. And I just thought, like, how resilient is the body processing, detoxing toxins cellularly, but also the stress that comes emotionally with it and everything that's interconnected in between. Um, but I'm grateful for your lens of like understanding brain inflammation because it's not something that we're talking about enough. And when we go deeper in that rabbit hole, okay, I know we can spend whole days speaking to these, but when we think about the fact that women statistically are often diagnosed or even misdiagnosed with autoimmune conditions, thyroid conditions, viral conditions, women who live with chronic fatigue or migraines or mood swings that doctors can't explain, what are you seeing as some of the hidden toxins or hidden infections that are contributing to the rise in these symptoms?
And just in general, when it comes to the term that we use so often, autoimmune disease, it really means that we understand auto means your body is attacking you. So your immune system is confused and has decided instead of targeting whatever pathogens or toxins are in your body, it's going to attack your cells, your muscles, your thyroid, your kidneys, your brain. And there's typically either a genetic cause or what I like to say is an epigenetic cause. So
Mhm.
genetics, because I'm a genetics guru. I love genes. I'm a nerd. But I realized genetics is the gun, if you think about this analogy. And epigenetics, which is our environment, pulls the trigger. So with autoimmunity, there's also a root cause if you weren't born with it. And a lot of times as we have hormone changes, our immune system also changes. But when we have these environmental toxins, like some of the things I see commonly, mold or mycotoxins or heavy metals, and like I said earlier, tick-borne diseases and viruses, well, what we're learning is that toxins have the ability, and they're so smart, some of them,
Mhm.
to kind of enter into your cells, right? That's a concept called molecular mimicry. So these little toxins enter your cells, make your cells look foreign. So now your immune system, which is trying to do the right thing, thinks it's a foreign cell and it's missed and attacks it. That's where you get that autoimmune, your immune system attacking you. And it's becoming more and more common. These autoimmune rates are tripling because of the fact that we're in such a toxic society that's triggering immune system dysregulation, which is then leading to this inflammatory kind of brain inflammation that we're dealing with today. And it's all about, just understanding that autoimmune disease is just a catch term.
Yeah,
It's really
yeah.
triggered. And that's when it goes back to doing detective work. Anyone who comes into my office with an autoimmune disease that was not diagnosed at birth, I always say, why do you have this? And they might look
Yeah.
shocked, like, what do you mean? My doctor told me I had thyroid. Why? And so that's when we start to understand that the body is resilient. Your immune system is your friend. But when it becomes whacked and a hair trigger and going out of control, then we're in trouble. So we gotta stop the fire before it gets out of hand. And I think especially in women, because our body changes, it's a blessing and a curse to have our estrogen and progesterone change
Yeah.
every month because our brain sees that as a stressor. That's why a lot of women may tell me, my kid, when they were going through puberty, my daughter started changing. Or if they suffer from chronic complex illness, when I'm on my period, my symptoms are worse. Or we're transitioning to perimenopause and our brain isn't functioning as well. That's because of those hormonal shifts. So I know that was a long answer,
Yeah.
but that's the real answer. And those things, those hormone changes, stressors, make us more likely to be predisposed to some of these chronic complex illnesses.
And it's really that integrative approach that has to happen. And I love that reflection also because at the end of the day, autoimmune, what I like to say to my clients is your body is so incredibly resilient. It's protecting you. It's trying to protect you from the invaders or the stress that is surround you. And I think that a lot of women will hear autoimmune, and when they hear the word attack, they identify with somebody who's sick or somebody that's going to be sick, especially if there's somebody, maybe they haven't gotten to autoimmune yet. They come back with their lab saying that they are normal. But now, integrative medicine, the work that you do, can reveal specific diagnostics outside of standard testing that misses what mainstream medicine isn't catching, right? Lyme disease is one of those things. And Lyme disease is such a hot topic right now. You can tell me whether we are diagnosing now a little bit more, but I'm noticing that I'm working with more people who have Lyme disease. You've worked extensively with Lyme disease, with parasites, as you mentioned. Why are these so frequently misdiagnosed with people? And what gives you hope for patients that are navigating chronic illness?
So, this is an excellent question because there are two different schools of thoughts. Now, when I went to school, I had never heard of chronic Lyme. I'm from Detroit, quote unquote, there are no ticks there. But now I've had a lot of patients in urban environments. And I think of family members who may have had tick exposure, may that be from pets, dogs, whatever. It's just a misconception that you need to always have a rash. People think of that with Lyme.
Yeah.
Doctors are trained. If your patient doesn't have this circular rash, and they don't have positive serology on LabCorp or Quest, then they're crazy and something's
Hmm.
wrong with them. Or you might find that people aren't treated well enough. But we know and understand that these chronic conditions like Lyme disease, it's so nebulous how they present. You have this stereotype of everyone's going to have joint pain, muscle pain, aches. But I
Yeah.
can see patients as simple as just fatigue or bipolar, anxiety, depression without any other physical symptoms. And then it can transition to when I'm arguing with neurology for the patient who's been diagnosed as multiple sclerosis, who really, in fact, has tick-borne diseases. So it's because of these symptoms can be nebulous. The
Hmm.
testing can have some discrepancies among it. And the fact that these complex chronic tick-borne diseases compromise the immune system. So patients with
Hmm.
tick-borne disease look completely normal in some cases. And so that's why it's important that you find like a Lyme literate physician of a part of, like I mentioned earlier, ILADS, where we are doctors who are digging deeper. We're doing more standard tests. But then at the end of the day, Mona, Lyme disease is a clinical diagnosis for
Hmm.
patients. You look at their history, you can look at their blood work, but there are some symptoms, may that be neurologic, patients who are tired, brain fog, can't get out of bed, can't remember where they put their keys, can't have non-specific joint pain that comes and goes. I mean, I hear every story. Less than 50% of patients even recall having a tick bite or a
Yeah,
rash. And
exactly.
it exists everywhere, all throughout the world. So I'm always telling patients, look, don't give up. Find that help. And I think there's just more awareness now
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
Lyme disease has been around since the caveman.
Yeah,
And
good
I
point.
also think it's more in the media as well. And doctors like yourself are getting trained on how
Hmm.
to understand and treat this because it's not just one infection, it's multiple, and it's a lot of nebulous symptoms that affect the whole body. So I always tell patients, look, have your doctor throw that test in there. It won't hurt to
Yeah.
think about diseases if you can't explain, because Lyme disease is the great imitator. People get misdiagnosed, rheumatoid arthritis,
Yes.
multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, anxiety, depression, the things we're talking about. And it truly is this underlying infectious process causing neuroinflammation. It won't hurt to put that on the differential diagnosis when you don't understand why your symptoms exist.
And isn't it better to know sooner than later? I've heard stories, people who have severe Lyme disease who, could move into greater neurological degeneration, inflammation of the brain. And I'm wondering, can you give us some stories around how to heal or catching it sooner, what that could mean for somebody before it progresses? Or I'm going to throw this in as well. Is it something like Epstein-Barr? Once you have it, it's going dormant versus active. How does Lyme disease work that way?
Yeah, so let's answer these questions one at a time. So it is important that you get treated early because we know that even after 30 days, these organisms are able to create
Hmm.
specific types of resistance, all right, in the
Yeah.
body that makes it more challenging to treat. And because Lyme disease and some of the co-infections like Babesia, Bartonella, words your listeners probably like, what? I want you guys to be aware because some of these co-infections, right? They have this relapsing, remitting course. So at one point they may be active, and then you might go into remission, ignore your symptoms, and then you get something like a stressor. May that be COVID or mono or just emotional stress, a divorce, getting fired, can't sleep,
Mhm.
and that disease reactivates later. So that's why it's so important that you get it quick. But it's unfortunate that that does not happen to 80 to 90% of people who have this chronic complex illness. And it's all about stabilizing the foundation, like we talked about earlier, because these pathogens can wreak havoc through the
Yeah.
brain, the body, joints. However, if you're treating and that's all you're doing is trying to kill this infection, you're doing a disservice to the patient because you need optimal gut, you need optimal wellness, you need optimal relaxation, mindfulness, you need optimal food choices and sleep, you need optimal hormone support. So I always tell patients Lyme disease and complex illnesses, they are infections, but they're also immune diseases. And if I don't
Mhm.
stabilize your foundation, no matter how hard I try to kill with herbals or whatever it is that I'm going to use, antibiotics, etc., then it's going to take longer for you to recover. And it's going to be more likely that you're going to have this prolonged toxic journey, which is going to keep you transitioning to that neuroinflammatory state. So people always have to treat the person because
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah. Such a good, such great education. If you have symptoms and there's even a possibility that you could have been bitten by a tick, test sooner, 30 days. I did not know that. Which just makes sense, right? The sooner that you can catch something and support your body, and that integration is going to make the journey a lot easier. And I'm thinking about there's so many diagnoses that people will get and the reaction, whether it's themselves or their doctor, they want to attack it with steroids. They want to attack it with antifungals or antiherbals or whatever it is to kill it, antibiotics, you name it. And yet the system becomes more and more depleted over time, as opposed to your point, looking at the person as a whole to help them feel rejuvenated while going through the process of reducing their symptoms. It's powerful.
Yeah, and that goes back to what I mentioned earlier about that brain. We call it the limbic system that's in that
Hmm.
fight or flight, right? And that angst. Because guess what? That person, a lot of time the test might be falsely negative by their provider and they're kicked out the office, but yet they're still suffering. And that brings on its own level of trauma and own level of limbic system activity because the patient has been down this awful journey, right? On this quest to get better. And so that's why I always implement those strategies because if your brain and your frontal lobe and your limbic system are just on fire, or we're not dealing with your PTSD, or we're not calming you down, then the treatments won't be as effective. And I
Hmm.
think that's a big piece because even now I collaborate with a lot of my colleagues, and they may send me a patient who's been treated for Lyme disease with all the magic bullets, because these people are geniuses, these doctors, and still stuck and say, Dr. Cornish, look at their brain. What's up? And then I'm like, wait, did you check their limbic system? Did you know they had a traumatic brain injury? Or maybe they had sleep apnea. So all these complex illnesses, when you talk about the brain, it could be something missing that you're not thinking about outside of this infectious process.
Mm. I once worked with a woman who was on a major antifungal protocol for mold. But this woman had issues her entire life with detoxification, always prone to infection, thyroid antibodies, always kind of drifting towards high inflammatory markers within her system. And genetically, she just happened to be a poor methylator. She had poor detox pathways also. And she had grown up with mold at different points throughout her life that her body wasn't able to even release through the medication that she was given and everything like that. So the integration that you're speaking to is really powerful. And I really want listeners to own in on that. You helped develop at the Amen Clinic, I was reading there's a 2-week neuro intensive. It's a protocol that really combines the neuroscience and nutrition and the emotional healing, which you spoke about. Can you walk us through what that experience looks like and who it's designed for? Is it for people who have acute symptoms only?
It can be for anyone. So the reason I developed this program was because some patients just need that jump start to healing. They're going to see doctors and they may be seeing them every 6 to 8 weeks. And so what I like to do, I want to get all the answers. So the program was specifically created for patients who are suffering and don't know why. And they get all their testing. So I'm looking at mold, I'm looking at their gut. I'm checking for chronic infections. I'm checking their hormones. I'm getting a global overview of their foundation. And I'm looking at their brain scan for inflammation. So I have this complete biomarkers and imaging before they walk through their door. And that gives me the opportunity to be blessed enough that I can design a treatment that, boom, you see me twice a week. We get you the nutritional IVs you need. We start whatever treatment protocol in an aggressive manner while I'm holding your hand. Your limbic system is being worked on. And so it's just jump starting the healing. And we treat patients with mold, Lyme, autism, PANS, PANDAS, metals, anyone who just really needs, I call it like a supercharge. And I love it because it's one of the only programs I know. I wanted to implement one that looked at brain healing, because we use that term loosely of neuroinflammation. Then you guys say, is it really that? And I can show you yes or no. And then I can show you why. So I jumpstart the process. We work, it's a spiritual, emotional, physical journey. We're holding hands, we're staying faithful. And then at the end of those 2 weeks, we've made a pact. And that's the saddest part, is when the journey is over. So you've seen me several days a week. You've seen my nurse every day. You've got nutritional coaching. You're on the right plan. You got all your tests. And then we have to make sure when you return home that we continue that care. One mistake people make is they leave and they're like, oh, I'm feeling great. Then they go home to their moldy environment, or they go home to their poor lifestyle changes. And that's why I like the fact that it's intensive, because we do all the things I told you earlier. We give you those lifestyle long-term changes so that we can continue the healing once we've super jumped and jump started that process that is so needed. So we treat everyone, anyone who's like, even people who are just coming in like, Dr. Cornish, I'm foggy. I know something's wrong. Do my test and hurry up. Let's start this. And it's so funny. My favorite patient, one of my first patients in the program, she was 16 and she had Lyme disease, but she could not stop eating fast food. She's 16,
She's
like
16.
I would be with her parents on Zooms, like, look, don't fight, come over, to Virginia from California. Let's kidnap her. She won't be able to do what she wants to do for 2 weeks. And it's okay, because I'm with her regularly during that 2 weeks. She's going to start feeling better because we're going to put her on aggressive treatment, but she's going to see what that change does. And That to me is like the biggest part. It's making that intense lifestyle change as you start that healing process, but having someone who's not just a doctor, but who really walks that journey with you. So that's why it's intensive for many different reasons. And I love it. And like I said, I get so sad on that second week when they go, because I'm
Yeah.
like, I know I'm gonna see you, but you live far away. I'll see you again. But it's just like we become family. And I really mean it. We become like a family.
Your face actually lights up speaking about this, and I'm smiling over here thinking, what a beautiful concept. God, I pray in the future this level of personalized care, of personalization for a protocol for someone, so that we don't have to do so much detective work. We can actually create a protocol where we can instigate changes that people can immediately feel because it's based on their constitution and what modern medicine is uncovering about their biology. What
Yeah.
a concept, hey?
Yes, it is. I pray that that's kind of my
Yeah,
mission. You know, Mona, when you're in these fields and
yeah,
we see what we see every day, you have to have a mission. And I tell my kids, and I have two girls and a boy, and they're 9, and they'll say things like, "Mommy, you're on this," and they'll watch me, and I always give them my talks. Right. The funniest one is when I tell them, "Okay, you got to poop every day." They think that's
yeah,
hilarious.
yeah,
And, even when I'm talking about Lyme, they know they make their own videos. Like I'll go on Instagram, they'll have an own thing about mold. They know mold is bad. They know how to read
yeah,
the labels and see red dye. So it's kind of a gift and a curse, but it's a spiritual journey. And you have to believe in what you stand for because we're not doing this just because. No
no,
one who treats functional medicine is just doing it for patients or for money.
yeah,
We're doing it
yeah,
to be healers because that's what the world needs. It's just to make people understand that you can have an individually tailored approach at healing. And that's why a lot of times I do things like this and I go on social media because I try to give information as free as possible if you can't afford care in functional medicine. But I think just understanding that you're not alone and there is a plan that can be uniquely tailored to your specific needs. That's
mhm.
longevity. That's where we're trending in medicine.
God, I love your heart. Yeah, we touched on that. Both of us have kids waiting outside the doors, and here we are showing up. Like you said, for me, the intention behind this is to help as many people as humanly possible. If there is a potential to help even one person who listens to this, my gosh, then that's a win, because the reflection that you and I see every single day is the degree of suffering that is happening and people not knowing what to do or who to go to or how to heal, and accepting that as part of who they are when it doesn't have to be that way. So do not ignore your symptoms. Let the conversations like this really guide you into doing a deeper dive. Your work is phenomenal. And right now, part of that suffering, and I love that it's trending, and I love that women are having a spot in media when it comes to healthcare. But what I said before we started recording is that I don't see any women who look like me. And my girlfriend, my best girlfriend, who looks like you, also feels like there is not enough representation of women of color who are also experiencing perimenopause, estrogen changes, understanding how hormones and brain function impact each other and are suffering throughout this. And you are a unicorn in this space. So you share a lot about this. You have a lot of education on your platform about this, but can you share, how do hormones and brain health influence each other as women who are navigating all of these changes hormonally and accepting it as a form of suffering? What's actually happening in the brain?
Yeah, and I'm so happy you asked that because that's one thing I always reveal even to my patients, like almost, being 46 and it's like, oh my God, perimenopause is here and it's real. When
Yeah.
you start getting those hormone changes, our brain support changes. So you might start getting things like fatigue. You always think of when grandma told you, oh, hot flashes. But my mother never told me about this thing called perimenopause or menopause. I just thought it's over. My cycle's over. I can't have kids anymore. But now
Yeah.
living through this journey, you start seeing that having optimal hormone support is necessary for optimal brain support. So you can start having sleep disturbances, that stubborn weight gain, that fatigue where you're feel like you need to take naps. I know for me, before I started my progesterone, which is what I use for perimenopause, I woke up every day at 3 a.m. And then I
Yeah.
found myself sad.
Mm.
I was like, I have a beautiful life. I'm very blessed. Why am I sitting here crying? Like,
Yeah.
why
Yeah. It's
is
true.
everyone pissing me off? That's not my nature. So it's just understanding that those changes are happening and that they're normal and there are things you can do to support them. I think it's also important to know that women of color, we can go through menopause and perimenopause much earlier, right?
Hmm.
And it's something that's really not discussed. But then there's supportive strategies that you can use to optimize your brain health. And so I teach even my 30-year-old patients that, look, we got to prepare for this. We need to start eating foods that are anti-inflammatory. We need to exercise. We need to get your sleep right. We need to make sure we detox you because once these hormone changes hit, you're going to feel it.
Hmm.
But if we
Yeah.
have that
Yeah.
optimal support during that time, when it gets to the point where we are dealing with those changes, we can handle them better. But also, admit that you're having them. You don't have to
Yeah.
suffer in silence. There's so many things we can do, even of free things like telling you how to eat better and how to eat antioxidants in your cruciferous vegetables and cutting out your sugar and just doing things like our natural remedies for anxiety, like GABA and L-theanine and, things like that. Or just making sure you're optimizing your sleep or giving you natural support for those night sweats. And even when it gets to the point of finding ways, because I hear this all the time, menopause is for rich people. I can't afford
Mm.
treatment.
Hmm.
Yes, you can.
Yes, you can.
Once you get to that point, there are bioidentical or natural strategies, some of which can get covered by insurance, but it's just having that conversation and letting women know that this is a normal transition in your body. It's a beautiful change. Don't be afraid of it. Accept it. That means congratulations. We made it over the hump. We're
You got
getting
it.
there. You're
Yeah.
blessed to get to this point in your life, but let's accept it and let's do things to make it pleasurable, is what I like to
Oh,
look at.
yeah. And coming from a doctor is so key because the lens right now going through the stage of life is fear, doom, gloom, getting ahead of it, the expenses behind it, and then, of course, how it leads into either positive or negative longevity, right? So, thank you for that
Yes.
reflection because I know that this is the wisdom of the body working, but I think the wisdom of the woman's body in a modern world do not necessarily align. So, by having conversations like this, we can get ahead of it. And I love that you called out speaking to prevention earlier, not waiting until you experience the depth of the symptoms. I wish I'd started progesterone earlier. Man, oh man, I think about the nights of sleep that I could have gotten back, the anxiety that could have been alleviated as well. It's a game changer. So let's put that through the lens of longevity then, because right now, as we're speaking more to neurological well-being and the health of our brain and cognitive decline and preventable, diseases that we can really, manage if we get ahead of it early enough. From a longevity perspective, what would you say are the most powerful things that we can do to protect our brain and prevent cognitive decline as we age?
I think, first of all, brain exercises. If you don't
Mm,
use your brain, you're going to lose it. So, even for that retired person, or just finding ways to stimulate you, memory games, or going out, getting sunlight, or being more physically active, or just because people get so addicted to devices and being
yeah.
isolated, you don't want to stimulate that brain. So, you have to work on brain stimulation that's not dependent on just electronic. We're not talking about stimulating your dopamine. We're talking about being intentional with the time you spend learning and interacting with others and rebuilding that sense of community and getting spiritually grounded. That's very important.
Mm,
As far as the medical pieces, we all know, okay, we need to eat better and we need to exercise. But we don't talk a lot about detoxification because you hear that term and it goes back to what we mentioned earlier. Oh, yeah, I need to do a juice or parasite cleanse or this cleanse. No, detoxing is just unwinding. It's just grinding. It's just grounding. And it's
Yeah.
just grounding. It's just finding that sense of peace. If that means a sauna, like you mentioned earlier, if that means earthing, going out in the beach barefoot, if that means just getting that vitamin D and taking that walk in the morning, if that means just having your gratitude journal, you're detoxing from those negative energies and sources that plague us, that haunt us. And then when it comes from your body, yes, doing the saunas, doing the detox herbals, doing the lemon water, eating the right foods will detox your body. But you also have to remember to detox your mind because
Mm.
they go hand in hand. You can do all the supplements and cold plunges and all the things and the biohacking you want. But if you're not focusing on detoxing that mind, that spirituality, then it's not going to connect.
I love that you live at that intersection between spirituality and neuroscience. It's really powerful. And to your point, yeah, we're exposed to over 700,000 synthetic chemicals from our environment. And I'm sure when those were created, they weren't tested for neurotoxicity and whether or not, they would live in the tissues in our cells and in our brain. And here we are today. So you mentioned some pretty important practices around detoxification, the right times of food, sauna, grounding, the mindfulness around our thoughts. Should we be taking any actions like in the world of supplements where we're supplementing for everything? Do you prescribe something to really support the brain in detoxification?
Oh, yeah. My most important supplement for
Hmm.
brain health is vitamin D.
Love
I
it.
always make sure someone has a vitamin D of at least 50.
Okay.
Fish oil or vegan fish oil, we know all the literature that shows how it supports the brain, as well as vitamin D, which we know is like a hormone. And so many of us are deficient in it. And it supports just our immune system, our brain, our bones, our cognitive, and even our mental health. I also look at things like glutathione
Hmm.
and NAC because those are things that get our liver working, get it stimulated. I tend to prescribe lemon water and
Love
Epsom
it.
salt baths,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
basic free things. And I'll never forget I did a video once, and one of my friends called me. I hadn't talked to in years, and she's like, "How do you spell glutathione?" That made my day. I was like, what? Someone helped heard that word and looked it up, and now their liver is better. I also,
Beautiful.
depending on what patients are doing and exposed to, we might use things called binders like
Yeah. Yeah.
charcoal or clay or zeolite. But my detox toolbox is so long. I
I
use
bet.
IVs,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
use hyperbaric oxygen. I mean, you can go on for days, but I
Yeah.
always make sure whatever I recommend, we start with what's free
Hmm.
and then we go up. And to make it individually tailored to what the patient can realistically do and what their body will respond to. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how you need to make it individually tailored because it's no one-stop shop. Sometimes a detox herbal, if you just go out and buy it, it may cause more harm than good. So I always recommend to do under the guidance of some sort of health professional because just trying it yourself, it might not go as well as we would like.
So important. And I think that you and I can agree there's no shortage of information on the foods and herbs that come from nature that will support your liver and the foods and the herbs that will support your gut. And when you support your liver and your gut, you'll support your brain.
Exactly.
Thank you for that. All right, as we wrap things up, I'm curious, in the way that you've been speaking today, you give a lot of hope. And there's a lot of listeners I know who may feel hopeless after years of searching for answers, or maybe now going through a season where they're navigating how their body's aging and getting older. What message do you want to leave to the audience about what's possible for their healing?
I want you to know that what you're feeling right now, it's okay to feel that way. If I have a person who comes to my office and is like, oh, yeah, I've been suffering from this, and then they're happy and running around, that doesn't seem as normal. It's okay to feel nervous and to feel scared, but just know that that can take a toll on your recovery. You want to
Hmm.
focus on the next step and understand that keeping that faith will get you to the other side, no matter what that faith may be in. It doesn't matter what your spiritual grounding, what did you believe in, but know that the best is yet to come. And even if it might be some dark nights, some gloomy nights, some chronic pain, you might have 40 things that you're supposed to take a day because you're on this quest of healing. Everything happens for a reason, and
Yeah.
there is someone or multiple people who can help you. And don't give up. Don't give up.
You are a unicorn. I'm so grateful for you and this conversation. Dr. Eboni Cornish, where can people find you? Where do you like connecting with your community?
Yeah. So we mentioned earlier, Instagram, it's and it's my name, Dr. Cornish. So Dr. Eboni Cornish. You can reach me at theamenclinics.com or my website, which is my name, drebonycornish.com. And, just available, just reach out if you need that help. And, someone's here to help you.
We will link out everything in the show notes. My last question for you is if you had to pick one thing about modern neuroscience that excites you the most, what would it be?
Something big question. I don't have one. All right. I'm like fangirling over that question right
I
now.
love it.
That's like the best question ever. Um, hmm. Oh goodness. The fascinating thing about neuroscience, okay, it's kind of nerdy, guys. So when med school, there's this area that we were taught about that we all have in the back of our brain. It's called cerebellum. And we used to think of it as little brain. We thought that it was only responsible for position sense. That's what we learned. We neglected that little thing. Cerebellum, okay. If you're walking straight, you're okay. But now we know that it has control over so many areas of the brain. It helps with cognition and your moods, and it helps with your focus, and it helps with inflammation, and it can be healed. You can get more
Hmm.
activity there, and that can lead to healing of the entire brain and its structures. I think that's the coolest thing. I've actually spoken on that topic before because it just blew my mind. And
Yeah.
also how the brain can heal in general, because we thought one day, oh, if you get brain damage, it's done. You're out of here. Over, lights out. You got a concussion. Don't want to see you. See you later. But it can heal. And I have so many SPECT scans before and after treatments that are fascinating, especially even with the research of Dr. Aben at the clinics,
Yeah.
having
Yeah.
over 250 or more, 1,000 brains, and seeing how different strategies can heal it. Man, it just is amazing. It just shows me that there has to be a God, because this body was definitely created beautifully.
What a miracle it is. And gosh, learning through practitioners like you, like, my jaw is just open in awe of what we're uncovering and this wisdom of the body that exists. So thank you for your excitement. You're an amazing educator, and I'm so grateful to have met you, and I cannot wait to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope we keep in touch with patients too.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It's moving to the top of my list now. The fact that it's not something that's really talked about or included. We focus so much on digestion and hormones, but the brain is the biggest part, drives our
It,
everyday.
it does. And thank
Yeah,
you so much for your time.
my pleasure. Thank you.